Hello and welcome to today's edition of the Infosec Institute's weekly video series and podcast. Today, our guest is Carolyn Crandall, Chief Deception Officer at Attivo Networks, who will tell us about deception technology, incident response teams, and security awareness strategies and triage mechanisms after you've been breached. Carolyn Crandall is Chief Deception Officer at Attivo Networks. She has over 25 years of experience in building emerging technology markets in security, networking, and storage industries, and is an active speaker on security innovation, CISO forums, and industry events. In 2018, Carolyn was inducted into the Hall of Femme by DMN, recognized as a Businesswoman of the Year by CEO Today, and as a Power 100 Woman of the Channel by CRN. In her role as Chief Deception Officer, Crandall focuses on helping organizations mitigate their breach risk by educating them on how to shift from a prevention-based security infrastructure to one of an active security defense based on the adoption of deception cyber warfare. Please welcome Carolyn Crandall. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start out with the concept of deception technology. It's not necessarily a concept that's common knowledge to all up-and-coming tech professionals. Can you describe what deception technology is and how it differs from, say, incident response or threat hunting?
Sure, absolutely. And it's really interesting because deception as a method for kind of outsmarting or outwitting the adversary is not necessarily new. It's been used for millennia for military, sports, gambling, chess, it's very common. But what Attivo has done is it's brought deception technology into the world of cybersecurity. And it's different because most security mechanisms are all focused on keeping the bad guy out. And in today's world, it is impossible with all the different threat vectors, the attack surface. Things are going to get in. And so deception specifically is designed to lay traps and misdirections for the attacker. How it would be different from the incident response side of things is that that's generally once you've detected an attack and you're trying to respond to that attack to stop it, remediate it, and make sure it doesn't return again. And it's kind of a little blend with the deception that it's not only about the early detection, but what some people will deem as an active defense, which pulls in those incident response actions that says, well, it's interesting to detect the attack, but it's more value to be able to detect and respond. And it's even more interesting if you can automate those things to simplify and speed up that response. And so with today's distributed deception platforms, you get the detection, plus you get that active defense all the way through response.
So sort of walk me through, like, how would one sort of implement deception technology or deception response into their security plan? Do you have like an in-house team?
Sure. No, and it's really interesting because there's a lot of myths that we come across with deception. And the first is, wow, this sounds really complicated, and I am going to need to have a fleet of highly trained personnel on board to be able to run this. But it's really not true, because with today's technology, there are things available like machine learning, which will self-learn the network, and it will basically generate the deceptions for you. And those deceptions could be in the form of network decoys. So they could look like your servers, your endpoints, your routers, your VoIP systems, industrial control, medical IoT. It really doesn't matter. So the setup of making those decoys look identical is all automatically generated. And the second piece that people will do is catching the attacker at the endpoint. So for them to be able to get to their assets, they're not only going to have to do reconnaissance of the network, but they're going to need the credentials to get to where they want. And so you get those deceptions that are planted out at the endpoint. And again, those are all automatically generated by learning the attributes and even integrating with Active Directories. So you get mirror match authentication, plus you get the validation so that it becomes believable to the attacker. What we found is it generally takes a quarter of a person to deploy, and generally within 1 day, the deception environment, and typically less than a quarter to an eighth of a person to operate even a large global network, given the ease of use with commercialized deception projects.
Well, that's really interesting, and that was going to be another question I had. So when you were first hired at Attivo, you were tasked with creating the deception technology market from scratch. So what were some of the challenges involved with this? And as you say, I was going to ask how you might convince the C-suite of the need for such a department, but it sounds like it's a very sort of efficient system that, you could certainly sell them on, and, from a financial standpoint, if it's, eighth of a person and so forth.
Yeah, the biggest challenge with deception is perception, right?
Okay.
We're pretty sophisticated adversaries, so usually it's, does this work, right? Or is an attacker going to find this believable and fall for it? And it's very different than some of the early low interaction emulated type deception, which an attacker could find their way through very easily. But with today's deception, it is extremely authentic and even validates that an attacker is going to take a look because it's going to look attractive, and all it takes is one mistake to reveal them. So it is a very useful way of getting the in-network eyes in the network visibility to threats before they become a problem, which you would think that most people would then go, this is great. I've invested a lot in prevention. Layering prevention isn't getting me to where I need to be. Let's look at detection. And so if I can get over the believability hurdle, the next hurdle becomes, well, isn't this a luxury item only for the companies with the most sophisticated security infrastructure? And isn't this what we do last? And what I would say for that is we have quite the mix of customers, from very sophisticated to, we had actually a new customer that came on board. Their first new company, first purchase firewall, their second purchase was deception. And the reason why they went to this as the second purchase is that for them to get every security control that they would need to have reliable detection, they didn't have that budget. So what they needed was very accurate detection when an adversary did get in the network, or maybe it was an insider or a supplier or contractor that they needed to know with high fidelity that that attack was there. So a lot of it is taking the C-suite through, this is your security controls you have today. Here's the attack phases. Here are the different types of attacks. Here's the attack surfaces. And how confident are you in the reliability of your tools to detect throughout this process? And it really boils down to deception being the most accurate and efficient form of detection that is out on the market today. And so that's the hurdle, is kind of breaking down the process, that it's not a replacement. Keep preventing as much as you can, but here is your eyes and ears visibility in the network with a lot of substantiation when it goes off, because it's only based upon attacker engagement, so that they can respond quickly and effectively. So that's a little bit of the talk track that we go through, and it is working, because we're seeing a dramatic increase in sales. But I like to also joke around, it's kind of like the first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. First rule of deception is you don't talk about deception.
Yeah.
And so a lot of companies are out using it, but they're not talking about it in big, broad public places.
So when you're using deception in sort of tracking, potential attackers and so forth, how much sort of data does that give you about what the attackers are doing, where they're making their way in? Is this the sort of thing where you can sort of see where your soft points are, where your potential breach points are, and things like that?
Absolutely. And there's different facets of deception. And so I would definitely encourage anybody looking at deception technology to really look at what's within each vendor's products. And so since I work for Attivo, I'll talk a little bit about what is included inside of that platform. And so the first thing is, it is important to be able to create an environment to detect the attacker, but it becomes more interesting when you can continue to let that attack play out in a sandboxed environment. So you can pick up the full threat intel, you can pick up adversary intelligence, and there are even some things that can be done today to plant deception documents so that you get counterintelligence, such as what files are being stolen, geolocation of where they're being opened up. And so the ability to be able to pull all of that full TTPs, the IOCs of the attack, and be able to share that with other systems becomes extremely valuable in making that alert high fidelity and actionable. And we also say actionable with confidence, because you know that we're not going off unless something is happening that really shouldn't be. And so I think that's where you can look at the detection through the incident response piece. If you go kind of post-compromise, and we've been brought in situations where we work with a lot of the large incident response companies, and their concerns are, one, how do I know if this has been eradicated? And in situations where even Active Directory is compromised, they already know the full map of my network. And so how do I know if they return? And Mandy will even shoot out a stat that says over 50% of attackers return. So, right, so how do you set the traps and the landmines so when the attacker comes in and returns? And so we do a lot of things after a company has been infected, whether it was a full breach or not, but to make sure that it's completely removed and that in places where it will stop the most effectively, those traps are put into place. Other things that can be done is attack replays, so you can understand how the attacker moves during their attack. And you can also get attack path visibility, which people will look at as, well, let's reduce the attack surface. So if I remove those exposed credentials from the network that would lead them to their target, their job just got a lot harder to be able to complete. And so there's a lot of visibility tools that are built into the deception platform that will let them know, here's how you stop them and slow them down, and set up those little booby traps along the way to catch them as they're getting close to what they may be looking for.
Very interesting. So that it almost sounds like the equivalent would be like, a house security system where it sort of almost follows the thief as after they've tried to break in unsuccessfully, and sort of follows them back to their lair or something like that. Like you can really see the whole path there.
Yeah, the geolocation is really interesting. I mean, I won't say it's going to give you 100%.
Of course. Yeah, you're not going to be able to break down their evil lair or anything like that, I'm sure. But it is, and it's interesting, too, because a lot of people will go, well, can I embed malware or do other counter hacking? And for the record, that is illegal, and we don't highly unrecommended.
Suppose that you do that. However, government and military could choose to if they wanted to. But for most organizations, we would say, look, it just gives you intelligence. So let's take a look at patent theft, IP theft, recent things that were stolen with, the autonomous cars. Like, if that person wouldn't have been caught, how would they have known that data even got exfiltrated before all of a sudden their designs showed up somewhere else and created a competitive disadvantage? This way, at least if they lift those documents, they'll get alerted when somebody opens them to say, aha, this was the kind of file they were going after or data they were going after, and this is the place that it was opened. So again, just a little more counterintelligence to strengthen your defenses.
So what do you mean when I was talking to you before the interview? You said one of the phrase that stuck out with me was that breaches are inevitable. How do you sort of define that, and how should that concept be internalized by companies' in-house security departments? How should it affect their strategy?
It's an interesting piece. I was looking at that in some of the notes before, and I thought, well, if I said breaches are inevitable, I probably should rephrase that and say infections are inevitable. Okay. I think that breaches could be avoidable with the right measures, but the reality is that everybody has infections on their network today. It's just a matter of figuring out what's there and how likely is it to harm you. And so I think it is really important for companies to take an assumed compromised position to their network security. And that is that things are in the network, and how accurately and efficiently can you find them. So if you do that, you can set up those traps so that the attacker is going to make a mistake. And normally it's the security teams. We have to be perfect, right? We can't make any mistake or the attacker will exploit it. Well, let's make the attacker be perfect, right? So all they have to do is ping recon, lift the wrong credentials, and it'll get an alert. So because of that, I think you can stop an attacker early in the cycle before they get a chance to establish a foothold. And even if they don't go to a full breach, there's a mess they can often leave in the network of just, things that are time triggered. They compromise your Active Directory. There are things that become a giant mess to clean up. But if they don't even get a chance to get past the kind of the foyer, right, then we can stop them before any real harm is done.
Now, knowing that breaches are inevitable is one thing, but how do you convey this to a staff? This is sort of moving it into the security awareness arena, but how can you sort of convey this concept to your staff without making it seem like the threat isn't a big deal? Because some employees might hear, well, breaches are inevitable, and use it as an excuse for risky behavior online. But how do you convey that there's no such thing as a breach-proof security system while also making sure that they continue to follow the company's security strategy?
Yeah. Well, I think the reality is that we're human, so we're prone with making mistakes and error. And so that as a security team, you just have to assume that human mistakes are going to happen and you're never going to get that 100% done. And it's really interesting looking at some of the phishing campaigns that are out there, and we study a lot of these things. And you look at it and you go, okay, even if you could get down to 10% of your employees are the ones that make a mistake, make the wrong click, do the wrong thing, that is still a pretty gaping hole. And so as much as you may try to educate your employees, don't click, don't do this or that, the attacker's going to get in. And so I think absolutely educate that, here are the behaviors and things, and don't assume that there is 100% security, and don't assume there's a silver bullet. That then you start with a foundation that says, okay, if we believe that, now let's do what we would do if we were in a game of chess, right? You put things around, you take offense and defensive measures to outmaneuver, and you secure it. But I think ultimately a security team just has to assume that human error is going to happen, and that, depending upon the industry, you're going to have very aggressive targeted attacks that are just going to get more and more sophisticated. And as a small company, you're not immune either, right? There's things that you can buy off the dark web now that you can buy these kits to attack, and you just slightly repackage them, and you're going to get by a small company's security system. So again, how do you know when those adversaries get through, or maybe it's an insider, to make sure you catch it before it becomes a problem?
So assuming your company is breached, what is the next step? And is it possible to examine the sort of end user data through deception to see whether security awareness training or more information for the staff might have prevented it?
Yeah. In a lot of detection mechanisms, it's not possible because it just blocks or stops, right? And then all that information is removed. But the neat thing about deception is that we can study the attack. So you can look at the lateral movement, you can look at the targets, you can even do things to figure out what the credentials are that are being stolen. So there's a lot of intelligence that can be gathered to strengthen defenses. We recently set up something where we set up some web servers that were deception to try to figure out whose legitimate credentials were being used to compromise the networks. And so there's lots of different tools and techniques that we can apply within the deception environment to get a better understanding of, who's not patching, who's not, using good hygiene, all those other things that may or may not come out with other tools. And so there's even some things down to memory forensics, which are, often lost, that we can pick up off the endpoint in our deception. And so again, it helps get a better understanding of what the attackers' tools, methods they were using, and again, use that to try to improve. Which is, again, very unique to deception, because so often it's just lost when you kind of just cut off the lifeline and then you just don't know.
Going back to sort of the sort of scale of things, do you generally recommend having in-house deception teams, or do most people use freelancers to come in? Do you set up a system and let it go? Do you keep someone on staff like that? Sort of, what are the benefits versus freelancing similar experts on a case-by-case basis?
Yeah. Well, I think the interesting answer to that is that even in our largest of global networks, they have never added a dedicated person to staff the deception environment. As I mentioned earlier on, it's usually a quarter to an eighth of a person that will be responsible for managing even these large networks. So I don't think you need to outsource that. There's a lot of native integrations with existing security controls that even make the incident response simplified, because we'll just feed that through their firewalls, their NACs, their EDR systems, so that all of it is automated and simple. That said, there are a large number of smaller organizations that are using managed services for managed prevention. Okay. And I am a huge fan of managed services to include a managed detection service so that they get the help. Because even if I raise an alert for some and give them all the information, they may not have the expertise to know how to remediate the situation and to prevent that attacker from coming back. And so I think that's a great place for people to get help to make sure it's been eradicated and it's been remediated and it doesn't have an opportunity to return. But the overall operations of a deception environment to start is actually really recognized for its ease of deployment, the machine learning to make the operations automatic on that, and then you really just get proposed campaigns that will say, here's a refresh of the credentials, here's a refresh of your decoys, do you like that? Push the button, and you're going forward again. So, and then we've also done things to create different levels of the user interface. So if you're a very small business, very small infrastructure, you might go, I just want to operate in a basic menu. And if you're a Fortune 10 customer, you're probably like, yeah, I'm going to turn on the advanced ones because I want to do a lot more with what the platform has to offer. And there's a lot of things they can do with the platform.
So is it kind of a sliding scale in terms of sort of buying different packages or sort of different levels or different sizes of security, or is it just what the organization feels they need and want to sort of incorporate?
Yeah, it's really all included, and it's really based upon the appetite. I'll say that the majority of people will buy deception for that early and accurate detection, but what they start to fall in love with is all of the other things that they can do for the attack analysis, the forensic reporting, the automations for incident response. And so we kind of joke about it being the week 2 experience, that when people get comfortable that they've got things deployed and now they want to start utilizing the tool, understanding how to better respond, how to better visualize the attacks, that's when they kick on the other features. But there's no incremental charge for those things. They all become available. It's probably just a matter of going from that basic window over to the advanced one and deciding how much customization you want to apply or how many of the features you want to use.
Can we talk a little bit about the issue of remote workers and BYOD and so forth? What are some of the strategies used to reduce risks involved with having remote workers and having people sort of off-site or off-network and so forth? Is that connected in any way?
Yeah, it's interesting. We have a lot of conversations around BYOD. It is just such a hard situation. Some of the more interesting ones, I think, come out of like the university campuses, that it is, as they call it, the Wild West, right? They can't control what devices are coming on the network. They can't control whether they're patched or not patched, and they can't control even what they do, right, as students. So I think the reality is we tried to design a system that said it's going to happen, whether it's BYOD, whether it's an IoT device that has no real security standards or requirements today. There's always going to be something coming onto the network. Again, it just goes back to if you take, in trying to stop it, don't take that approach, but just accept that it's going to happen. Then you put in the controls to trust but verify, and do it in a way that you're not going to get plagued with lots of false positives or other things. Because if that BYOD device sits on your network and nothing bad is happening with it, you might go, okay, that's just something I'm going to accept the risk on. If all of a sudden you start to get reconnaissance coming from that system or other bad behavior, then you get triggered to say, you know what, I'm just going to isolate it. I'm going to cut it off the system, and then I'm going to go investigate. But now you're kind of working on the needle in the haystack versus trying to remove all the needles before you know whether they're going to hurt you or not.
Interesting. In future, where do you see sort of deception technology going? I mean, everyone I've spoken to, in the last couple of days about security awareness topics is sort of described it as this arms race of, hackers go up one level, we go up one level, and so forth. And, so inevitably there's going to be some sort of, I imagine, a counter, response by hackers where they find a way to sort of like cover their footsteps or cover their, where do you see all this going, and where do you see like the next big sort of innovation for deception in the future?
Yeah. So I think that you're right. The games are always being upped, and I think that that's where the reality is that innovation, even forget what an adversary is doing, is going to outpace our ability to detect and add the security as quickly as we want as an overall industry and society. And so what you have to do is to set up something that, regardless of the type of attack, so regardless of the threat vector, regardless of the attack surface, you still have those traps in place to catch the activity before it comes through. And I'm not saying stop trying to innovate to stop and build the tall castles and deep moats. I think that's still an excellent idea. but have your contingency plan in that says there's always going to be innovation, so let's just plan for it and let's set the traps that if the things do get in, we know right away and we can stop them. And so from an innovation standpoint, will the attackers get more aggressive? I'm sure they will. Will they react differently when they find deception in the environment versus if they don't find it? There's an argument of, will they then attack harder? I would say you could argue that they won't, because now the attack surface just got more harder for them, right? And they have budgets and time that they're trying to work off of as well. And so if you make it a harder organization to attack, they may choose a different place to go attack that's easier for them to be successful. And at a minimum, you're slowing them down so that you have more of a chance to strengthen your defenses against them. So as attack surfaces change, we need to see, and we have seen deception keep up with things like IoT, SCADA environments, router and VoIP infrastructure, printer infrastructure. Yeah, there's just so many different things that deception has done to say, regardless of what the attack surface is, we're going to keep covering it. And we're going to add the applications and deceptions on top of it. But we're also going to modify so that as things like serverless computing, containers, other things come in that change the way that you do security, that we stay relevant as well. And we continue to be able to offer them the best detection across any attack surface and any form of threat.
That sounds great. And I think going back to the sort of home defense thing, it seems like it's a really good point that if a burglar sees a sign in front of the window, then, they're like, well, that's too much time or too much threat or whatever. So there's sort of that balance between, if they know they're being watched, they're maybe less likely to stick with you. But at the same time, you have to kind of keep your deception department a secret so that they don't necessarily, know it on the way in. And what have you.
Yeah, and sometimes it does just act as a deterrent. If you think about even having security guards at the front door, there's only so many of them that you can watch people coming in and going out that's going to be effective. But you start to plant things throughout the store and put video surveillance and other things, and things that would look like easy targets to steal that have the little buzzers included. That's what we're doing is we're giving that extra line of defense. It says, okay, instead of going to 3, 4, 5, 6, security guards at the front door, take a little bit of that investment and put the detection inside so that you can stop things from happening through, like everything. You never win a chess game without, a little mix of offense and defense. And that's what we're proposing and people are buying into today is that, it's a pretty cool and efficient way and it works. We've got a long list of detections that we found that show that we can outsmart and trip up the adversary. So, people are buying into this as a very, kind of the de facto security control for in-network detection.
That sounds great. Well, thank you very much, Carolyn, for telling us about detection today. And thank you all for listening and watching. You can find more of these videos on our YouTube page. Just go to YouTube and type in Infosec Institute. That's INFOSEC. And you'll find lots more videos, career track videos, tool videos, and also these security awareness topics. If you'd rather have us in your ears during your workday, all of our videos are also available as audio podcasts. Just search for Cyberspeak with Infosec Institute on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to read more about security awareness topics, please visit resources.infosecinstitute.com for thousands of articles, labs, videos, and more. And also check out securityiq.infosec.com. It's a new security awareness system we've built. You can send fake phishing emails to your friends. Then when they click on them, you can find out just who is taking the bait right now. So again, thank you to Carolyn Crandall from Attivo for her time. And thank you all for watching and listening. And we will talk to you next week.